I always say being a progressive just means you're the first to the best and most just idea. And then everybody else runs to catch up with us as we build the movement to make it the case.
Well, hello, folks, and welcome back to In the Meanwhile. I'm Marcus Harrison Green.
And I'm Nora Kenworthy.
You know, Nora, today we're going to do something we rarely do on this show.
And what's that, Marcus? A fountain of self-help gibberish? Are we like going the goop route? Light candles, whisper about boundaries, and then continue watching our empire collapse?
We are not going to go with the full scale. I think Gwenicide is what they're calling what Gwyneth Paltrow is doing these days. But no, we're going to start with some actual, honest to goodness, good news,
Oh
Nora.
my God. Having good news on this show is like seeing Elon Musk pay his taxes or something.
Well,
I'm intrigued, but I don't trust it.
let's not get too carried away with that tax-paying thing. But anyhow, yes, there was some real, actual, measurable leftward wave in the Democratic primaries this week, especially in New York, where a bunch of establishment-backed Democrats got walloped by candidates backed by Zohran Mamdani and the DSA.
Heck yes. Which means, for at least one glorious news cycle, the Democratic establishment got the same feedback that most millennials have been getting from their therapists for like 10 years now. Have you considered that the problem is not everyone else?
That's an indeed, Nora. Candidates backed by labor machines, by Hakeem Jeffries, by the old guard, the please clap, if you will, wing of the Democratic Party.
The wing whose main message is always, we understand your rent is unaffordable, your wages are stagnant, the planet is on fire, but have you considered a tasteful PowerPoint on bipartisan norms and civility?
Yeah, yes, that exact wing. Guess what? They got their asses whooped, Nora.
Yes,
They
they
got
did.
their asses whooped. And they got beat by candidates speaking much more directly about affordability, about war, about working people. My God, I know. So how novel. And frankly, about the fact that a lot of Democratic voters are tired and fed up of being told to lower their expectations in the name of electability, quote unquote.
Yes, yes. And I wanna note that a particular piece of joy for me was learning that one of the students who had actually been arrested in the occupation at Columbia will now be representing Columbia. I'm sure that'll be fun for them.
I believe they call that poetic justice, Nora. Poetic justice.
Yes. But unfortunately, because we live in America where joy is always followed by a man in a red tie holding a flamethrower to the drywall, we also have some bad news this week.
Yes, let's get it over with.
I
It
know, I'm
seems
sorry.
like there is a return to this national model that, and then it gets worse.
Mhm.
So let's set the scene, folks. The 21st Century Road to Housing Act passed the Senate and the House with overwhelming bipartisan support. There's actually something that get done that isn't a war that is bipartisan. So there you go. But
Yeah.
anyhow, this bill represented one of the biggest efforts in decades to actually increase housing supply and reduce housing costs, things that are, crushing people across the country right now.
And not just in big coastal cities, right? Like renters everywhere, working families, people who have done everything right and still can't afford to put a roof over their heads. This bill would have reduced federal regulations, streamlined environmental reviews, sped up construction. And here's one I particularly liked, it would curtail corporate landlords from buying up single family homes and turning entire neighborhoods into rental portfolios.
Yeah, Nora. So you think, okay, both sides have come together. The American people finally win one after a series of brutal losses.
Which is already looking a little bit suspicious. So
Well, lo and behold, Nora, I know you didn't see this plot twist coming, I suppose, but yeah, it was right there, flashing in bright red, or I should say bright orange lights. Our president, Mr. Trump, canceled the signing ceremony. This is after the chairs had been set up, after the stage and the podium were already in place,
the
Nora.
chairs were already there, Marcus.
They were already there, Nora. And instead of signing it, no, he announced he will not put his name on the bill until the Senate passes something called the Save America Act, which would impose new identification requirements on voters and dramatically curtail mail in voting.
It's also known as the Save Trump's Behind from Going to Jail Act,
Very much so.
which might be
Very
why
much
he's so desperate to get it
so.
passed.
Absolutely.
Um, so just to be clear, Trump throws another hissy fit and says, "Sure, I'll sign the housing bill that might help millions of people afford a place to live, but only if you also help me make it harder for those same people to vote."
Yeah, it is literally the fact that housing is being held hostage to voter suppression.
Yes, it's such a pure expression of the modern Republican worldview. It's like instead of actually governing for people, we just have decided that it's easier to exclude those people from actually being able to participate in the governing.
Which brings us to the most entertaining or maybe most alarming, depending on your mood, subplot. Yes, there is one in this story, folks.
I hope this is about Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana,
How did you guess?
the man who has no Fs left to give in the Senate.
Funny how like people find their testicles after, they no longer have to run for office. Anyhow though, Cassidy already has Trump's boot print on his back. Trump endorsed a primary challenger who defeated him last month. So this is a man with very little left to lose.
I I mean, I'm all for his liberation, Marcus.
Would have been great had it come at, I don't know, 2 years ago, but whatever.
Yeah, along with, like, a
Anyway,
moral core.
seriously. Anyhow, when Trump came to Capitol Hill for a Republican lunch, Cassidy, because the war with Iran is still happening and the Trump administration told Congress it would be over in 4 weeks, Cassidy kind of called him out on that a little bit. He was like, this thing has been ongoing without achieving any clear U.S. objectives. It's kind of made things worse. I don't know.
So I think Trump responded by asking the room, why would anyone vote for the War Powers Act? Referring to the resolution that Cassidy and three other Republicans had co sponsored with Democrats to curtail his crazy war making authority. And apparently, Cassidy responded, "Is that a rhetorical question, or would you really like to know?"
Yeah, and yeah, jeez. And Trump said he did want to know. So Cassidy stood up and told him. He said he wanted real answers about the conflict, real briefings, real clarity, and Trump reportedly did not care for that at all. So apparently Trump raised his voice, pointed to Cassidy's recent primary loss, apparently as a way of, in Cassidy's words, trying to demean him.
Which, okay, say what you will about Bill Cassidy, but that's classically low for
That
Trump.
is the bar below hell, yes. Anyway, Cassidy then said he lost his temper, matched Trump's tone and volume, and I love that he blamed, quote, the Irish in me. And it went back and forth until his gut told him to sit down and de escalate. He subsequently behaved like the world's angriest Facebook commentator who somehow has nuclear codes. I don't know.
Mm,
Anyway,
very reassuring. Yeah,
yes.
politicians. Yeah. But here's the thing: underneath the dramatic lunchroom energy, Cassidy's actual argument is straightforward, and I think it's fair to say, like, appeals to a lot of voters. If
Yeah.
the administration shares what's happening in this war with Congress and with the American people, that satisfies his demands. But if you tell everyone everything is fine all the time, when it obviously isn't, he has a responsibility to push back.
Which is, I guess, just doing the job that he
Yeah, I
should be
think that's what's
doing?
called oversight, which is, like,
Okay.
literally constitutionally protected. But now we're in shouting matches about it.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's also telling that even when there's conflict inside the GOP, it's not because they've had some moral awakening. It's usually because the wheels are coming off the bus, and some of them are finally noticing they're on that bus.
Yeah, yeah, and they need someone to blame.
Yes, yes, they do.
It's giving vibes of, "I supported the man when he was cruel, lawless, corrupt, and deranged, but now that he's inconveniencing my campaign schedule, I have concerns."
Have you no decency? Have you no decency, sir? I will say, and the practical upshot is that the Save America Act, or the voting restriction bill Trump is demanding, is going absolutely nowhere fast. Democrats can filibuster it. I hope that they will filibuster it. And there's no way that it can get 60 votes.
I mean, the larger story here, Marcus, I think you're pointing to is that, like, the housing bill, the one that would actually meaningfully help people, is going to stay unsigned because Trump has had a hissy fit, essentially created a logjam out of spite.
Yeah, yeah, yes, he has. I will say this about Chuck Schumer. He has already voiced this publicly that if Trump vetoes the housing bill outright. Congress has the votes to override him. That said, right now there are millions of people who are being squeezed by rent and housing costs are waiting while the president negotiates over their heads. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess this is what some people voted for. I don't know, but here we
Yeah.
are.
And and it's worth saying this plainly and connecting these two more explicitly. Voter suppression is economic policy. It's not
Yes.
some separate abstract fight about procedure. When you make it harder for poor people, working people, renters, young people, communities of color to vote, all of which they've been doing, you are making it easier to preserve this incredibly unequal economic order that is actively immiserating people.
Absolutely. Like the anti-democratic project and the austerity project, they're not cousins, folks. They are identical twins. They're
Yeah,
identical
you're
twins.
definitely not allowed to get married.
No. Well, not in certain states. Anyway, moving on. I'm kid. I kid. I kid. Anyhow. But I'll say this, like, I mean, I also think Democrats should be making more of this, and they probably will, because like this is not a subtle contrast, right? We tried to lower housing costs, and the president blocked it because he wanted to make voting harder. It's, I would say, a pretty clean story.
Yeah, it is, which means Democrats will probably respond by releasing a 17-page PDF called A Framework for Understanding Stakeholder Frustration in a Changing Housing Ecosystem.
Yeah, complete with 3 bullet points, 2 caveats, and a quote from a consultant named Britt.
It's always a Brent.
Always a Brent. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, anyway, uh, let us take the briefest of detours, Nora, into what I can only describe as the funniest rich person headline of the week. Poor Elon Musk. He has lost his trillionaire status.
so sad, tragic, absolutely tragic. Somewhere a tiny violin is playing itself on autopilot while a man worth $970 billion is forced to survive like some kind of common hedge fund manager.
My God, I guess I'll see him in the bread line tomorrow night. But anyhow, back to good things, and I would say great things.
Yeah.
Back to Tuesday night in New York, because it truly, really was something, and I want to make sure that we continue to bask in it.
It was, yeah. I was actually counting on this being my 8 ounces of joy, but we'll preface this episode with joy as well. The short version here is Democratic establishment candidates backed by major labor unions, by Hakeem Jeffries, by the longstanding political power structure that has dominated New York politics for decades. They got beaten bad, like up
Yes.
and down the ballot. So, when we woke up, what was it, Wednesday morning, Mamdani and the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, are on track to pick up 6 new seats in the state legislature, growing their presence in Albany from 9 lawmakers to 15.
Yes, 15. A year ago, they were nothing more than a niche organization, quote unquote, and now they're reshaping New York's congressional delegation.
And the morning after the election, Frank Carone, a major Brooklyn Democratic power broker and close ally of former Mayor Eric Adams, he was arrested. Now, the question everybody is asking and answering differently depending on who you talk to is what does this all mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, if you're gonna like steel man, I guess the establishment case, which I have heard ad nauseum on
Mhm.
CNN, it's basically that these are quote unquote deep blue urban districts. You can run a Democratic Socialist here and win a primary, but they are not swing districts. So their cases at the races that determine whether Democrats take back the House are in the Central Valley, rural Maine, suburban Arizona, and Georgia, and that those voters are different. Jamie Harrison, the former DNC chairs, I believe was talking to the New York Times, and he said races in New York are really important, but New York is not America.
And that's a real argument, and I'm not dismissing it.
But Nora, I hear a but coming in. I hear a but
But
coming
this is the argument that the Democratic establishment makes every time we have a
in.
progressive win, right? "Oh, we need to be moderate in order to win." I mean, and we keep losing. We keep losing by moving rightwards. We lost the White House, we lost the
Yeah.
Senate, we lost the House. We watched major districts that had, voted for Biden switch rightwards. So, like, at what point does moderation become a cover story, or like window dressing for a party that isn't actually offering people anything that makes their lives better?
Yeah, or as I don't know, I like to put it, the eternal establishment Democratic strategy is if voters are desperate for bold action, maybe what they really want is a slightly warmer glass of room temperature oatmeal, right? I mean,
Sounds
like I
horrible. I mean, and whatever else you think of the left, whatever else you read into these particular elections this week, you have to give it to these candidates that they have a story. The DSA's Gabe Tobias put it this way: Democratic Socialists uniquely have an explanation for why things are so bad right now and what can be done differently. The establishment story is the world is complicated, we're trying our best, please be patient, right? Don't be unrealistic. And the alternate story that these candidates are offering is your rent is not high because of a tragic misunderstanding. It's high because people with power have built a machine that rewards extraction and punishes you.
Absolutely, and I think it's that second story that has the advantage of being, very true.
Yeah, and true in like a I feel it in my bones sort of way, right? For a lot
Yes.
of people.
Yes.
A recent New York Times Siena poll found that 49% of Democrats and Democratic leaning independents have a favorable view of socialism now. I could have never predicted this 10 years ago when I was hanging out with like scrappy groups of socialists in Washington state.
Yeah,
Um,
it's it was kinda that, I don't know if you saw that post where it was like the after the Knicks won the, NBA championship and there's a photo of New York celebrating and the caption is "New York under socialism." So I don't
yeah.
so maybe it's getting a rebrand, Nora. It's
Yeah,
getting a rebrand.
yeah. I mean, and the same poll also found that only 22%, have an unfavorable view of
Wow.
socialism. So officially, do you know who has a lower favorability rating than socialism among that group?
The hint is that I think we've brought him up earlier in our conversation. Would that be Chuck Schumer at
Yes, it
26%?
would.
Okay.
26%. That's a
Wow.
number that should keep some people up at night.
Interestingly enough, Republicans, at least Republican leadership, are trying to pretend that they're thrilled about all this. Like Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, called it the Marxist march around the country. And Trump called the three winners three solid communists on social media. So, you know, I don't know.
Which is also what they said about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in 2018, and then she turned out to be one of the most effective communicators and coalition builders in the Democratic Party. It's what they said about Mamdani,
Yeah.
and Trump himself ended up praising Mamdani in the Oval Office only weeks later. So
He did it really do that, Nora.
he
Like, I mean,
really
I
did.
think it's sort of like, hey, I guess people are down with communism and Marxism these days.
Yeah,
So
so,
go ahead.
like, is the, "Oh, you're such a radical socialist" attack really doing much work for the Republicans right now, or is it that I'd rather be a radical socialist than a Nazi?
There, hi. Excellent point. Excellent point. So I gotta ask, like, what do you think the traditional democratic machine failed so badly over
Well,
this
that
year?
is a loaded question mark. You know, I do think a lot of commentators on the losing side are essentially saying the same thing. They got out organized.
Yeah.
Unions did rallies. They spent millions on ads and mailers. It moved almost no votes. Stephen Cohen, a Democratic operative who ran a $40 million super PAC trying to stop Mamdani last year and failed, he said, "We deluded ourselves into thinking that contact by social media replaces contact in person, and it's just not true."
Nora, wait a minute. So this person paid $40 million to basically just find out that face to face,
Ground
door
game,
to door knocking
organizing
is probably
actually
more
work.
effective than sending a text message or email to somebody. My God,
Yeah.
well, no wonder the Democratic Party has, not been resurrected in recent years. My God. Okay,
Instilling
well,
confidence everywhere.
I just Jesus, man. Anyhow, wow. Okay. Well, hey. I will say that you had at least in the New York area, the Democratic Socialists of America did build an army of volunteers who just indeed go door to door and had real conversations with real voters, making them think like they actually, I don't know, gave a damn about what they had to say.
Yeah,
And you had again these establishment folks who sent out a couple text blasts, and wow, that was organizing.
yeah, yeah, and I think we see it more broadly beyond New York too, right? Like, we see the candidates and also the representatives who are showing up in districts and bringing people together and giving them actual ground game tools for winning, they're the ones who are showing us a different way to organize and be in politics. Union organizers in New York were saying that they kind of, quote, ran away from door knocking after the pandemic. And have reflected since this election, we need to concentrate more on, as I say, and this is a quote, touching skin, talking to people one on one. Now, I'm not sure if touching skin is really necessary, but like
Consensual, as long as it's consensual. Go ahead.
consensual, hopefully with hands.
Well, well, Nora, all of that said, and I know we spend a lot of time, critiquing the Democratic Party just mainly because that's the one party that I look at as a vehicle to actually get some of the things done that we really want to get done. There are, it should be stated, there are, Democrats who are actually doing the work, are in the fight, who have been, quite frankly, just critical of their own party in terms of trying to move it towards the progress that we need in this country. And I will say without a doubt that that is our guest today. Because Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, who represents Washington's 7th Congressional District and is now serving her 5th term in Congress, is somebody that since I've known her in the 2 decades that I've known her, she often says she doesn't have a give up bone in her body, even as she has been through, let's just say, a lot in Congress from 2016 to now. And yet she is still fighting the good fight.
We are so lucky to have her as our representative, but also as our exception to the Democratic rule. Before Capitol Hill, Pramila Jayapal was already a longtime organizer, a former Washington state senator, a champion for immigrant and civil rights, the founder of the largest immigrant rights organization in Washington state.
Yeah, and in 2016, as I mentioned, she became the first South Asian American woman ever elected to the House. She came to the United States alone at 16 and is now one of only a small number of naturalized citizens serving in Congress.
Yeah, she has such an inspiring and really incredible backstory. She's the kind of person who makes me want to rewrite the Constitution so that she could one day be president. She's also
Absolutely.
she's also been one of the clearest progressive voices in Washington, sponsoring bills like Medicare for All, the Housing is a Human Right Act, and the Ultra Millionaire Tax Act.
She serves on the Judiciary, Budget, and Foreign Affairs committees and previously chaired the Congressional Progressive Caucus for 6 years.
So today, we could not be more excited to have Congresswoman Jayapal joining us to talk about the midterms, the Democratic Party and where it's headed, progressive leadership, and most importantly, what keeps her going in a moment like this.
Congresswoman, again, just thank you so much for being with us today. I know you have been somebody that the listeners and fans of this show have wanted us to talk to for quite some time. So I'm glad that it is finally happening.
I'm thrilled I can be with you both.
Well, I do want to start off by asking you, it's no secret that we're living through a moment where cruelty increasingly passes for strategy and corruption passes for noise a lot of the time. Um, it One of the critiques is that Democrats still often seem caught between outrage and paralysis. And when I say Democrats, I mean, the larger, writ large, as we say. Um, so I want to ask you, from where you sit, what is this moment actually asking, of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I share your analysis. Actually, as you know, I've been a champion of trying to push our party to be better, to be stronger, to stand up to the special interests, to do things that may feel uncomfortable, to not, put our hand out to billionaires and giant corporate donors on the one hand, and then say that we're going to increase the minimum wage or do things for working people and then not deliver. I think that's what ultimately forces people to lose trust in our government and has people disengage or look for other solutions. And so I think this moment is incredibly exciting because a lot of times what happens is out of the ashes of ruins, something better can be built.
Mhm.
And that's not a sure thing. We are going to have to do a lot of work to do that out of the destruction of the healthcare system. I believe we can actually get universal healthcare. That's my Medicare for All bill in the House. Out of the cruelty of immigration policy under this administration, the kidnapping, the disappearing, the murdering of people, including US citizens, I think we can get comprehensive immigration reform that is humane. So I think that it's a really exciting moment. It's got its perils, of course, but it's going to require a stronger Democratic Party. It's going to require a stronger leadership and actually delivering for people and taking away the contradictions that undermine trust.
I mean, this all sounds like music to my ears after the last 2 years. Um, I it feels like so much is changing so quickly right now. Like, even this week, we saw returns from the primary elections in New York that are pointing towards some very rapidly shifting sands of what voters are hungry for right now. Um, what do you think voters really wanna hear as we head into this midterm fight? And how do you think Democrats should be campaigning, to appeal, not just appeal to voters, but actually to reassure them and, like, prove to them that the government's gonna work for them again?
Well, they want money out of politics. I just spoke at the Washington State Democrats convention in Eastern Washington. I've been campaigning with candidates across the country, including in Michigan and Ohio, Pennsylvania, California. They do not want candidates who are beholden to special interests and big money. That's a really big thing. Now, in that, there's APAC, there's crypto, there's, AI, there's a lot of different interests that come to the forefront, but I think that there is a giant repudiation of all of that big money. They also want somebody who is going to be authentic and who is going to understand their concerns. And when they get into power, not think about it as a moment to moderate down away from those promises, but to actually deliver on them. And I think that's where, there are a lot of Democrats that will say the right thing maybe when they're campaigning, but then they get into office and it's a very different story in terms of what they're actually willing to do and walk away from and walk towards, if you will. And so I think people want to hear about how their life is going to be better. And that is, how am I going to afford a house? How am I going to afford my childcare? How am I going to afford my health care? Those are top issues for voters, no matter where you are, no matter what party you're from. And if you remember, we got so close to delivering a $1.5 trillion investment in housing when I was the chair of the CPC and we got that bill through the House. We had to stand up to our Democratic leadership in the House and to the President of the United States. Not the easiest thing in the world, but it actually led to the Inflation Reduction Act and the biggest investment in climate. But we didn't get the housing piece done and we didn't get the childcare piece done. And if we had gotten those done, which 98% of the Democratic Party wanted, by the way, including the president, if we hadn't walked away so quickly from those things, I think we may not have lost the election because we would have delivered
Mhm.
something that people would wake up on and feel and see. And I think we have to get away from thinking that infrastructure only means hard jobs, building roads and bridges. That is very important. But infrastructure is also, what do you need for your family to be able to survive and actually thrive, not just survive. And so I think those are really a big part of what voters want to hear across the country. But they also want to know that they're going to have a democracy where there's not corruption happening in plain sight in front of us, where there's not a president who incited an insurrection to try and steal an election. Those things are important, and they're not. I think we can weave them together with the affordability pieces that voters also care about. They do care about a democracy, but you have to talk about it in terms of the right for people to have, to not be beholden to the largest transfer of wealth from working people to the wealthiest that take away opportunity for the rest of us.
Certainly. And Congresswoman, I love that you brought up the fact about, sort of the pressure at times to moderate down, if you will, that some not some many progressives face, to quote unquote be realistic, right? When it sort of means which ends up equating to sort of accepting the terms of debate, as they are, that have been made by people with much, smaller moral imaginations. And so I want to ask you, because you've always sort of, at least as long as I've known you, you sort of always aimed a little higher than the median, shall we say? So, how is it that both you and some other progressives that look like will be entering into Congress, how do they sort of find a center of gravity that without snapping back to the default of, well, let's just be as cautious as possible?
Hmm. Well, I think that, people call us radical, but I don't think there's anything radical about universal health care or
Mhm.
housing or the things that so many other, or universal childcare. I mean, these are not radical ideas. They're called radical here because there is a for-profit industry that benefits from denying us those things. And so I think part of it is we have to get Democratic establishment and moderates to start talking about how progressives are the crazy wing of the party. We're not. We're actually incredibly sane. And we reflect more accurately, I think, than most where voters are. Now,
Mhm.
across the board, can we get all of those ideas done immediately? No. So we also have to be able to govern. And I think that looking at Mayor Mamdani as an example, and I was really proud to be, I think, the only non-New York member of Congress who endorsed him before his primary.
Right, right.
And to put money and organizing time into going out there and campaigning with him, because I felt like he was somebody who was not only going to say what he was saying, but he was really strategic in thinking about how to govern. And you've seen that with the beginnings of his ability to deliver on childcare and new executive order that they just put in place to put in heat protections for workers. I mean, things to fix potholes. All the things that you need to do to govern in
Right,
that
right.
position. And I do think that progressives have to be able to govern, and we have to build the kind of coalition that we need to get the votes that we need to pass some of the things that we want to pass. And I think that we showed we could do that during Build Back Better. I think we'll have another opportunity when we get the trifecta again. But we should shoot much higher than whatever is the accepted, sort of pragmatic. The pragmatic position has not gotten us anywhere in this country.
Yeah, yeah.
And so let's turn that around. I always say being a progressive just means you're the first to the best and most just idea. And then everybody else runs to catch up with us as we build the movement to make it the case. That's
Mhm.
what progressives can do. We can build the movement. That does require building coalitions with unlikely partners. And I think that's something that, we have to be able to also do. So on surveillance, on stock trading bans for members of Congress, those are places where I'm leading on those issues and working with people like Chip Roy and Andy Biggs and Freedom Caucus members who I agree with on nothing else, right? But I found a place where we can work together.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so you've mentioned Medicare for all a couple of times. I wonder if I can pick that up for a second, because the aftermath of the fight for the Affordable Care Act is everyone thinking that healthcare is this like flashpoint of stuff that we can't agree on, and yet we know that we have to build these broader coalitions around health in order to achieve meaningful and just health reform for people. So at the same time, when I go out and talk to people, I think that the vast majority of Americans agree that their healthcare is too expensive, for example. So, where do you see those kind of broad based points of agreement and sort of nascent coalitions that can be working towards a Medicare for all as a kind of key position for Democrats going into the next session?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of what has happened is, the Affordable Care Act did expand healthcare for tens of millions of Americans. It was a good thing. And the private insurance companies, Big Pharma, they've all figured out how to exploit even what was good about the Affordable Care Act, right? They're vertically integrating, they're taking over clinics. So now not only are they providing your insurance and you're paying $25,000 for an insurance premium, that's not even the care that you're going to get. But then they're directing you to the clinics that they've now taken over and to their pharmacy benefit managers that they've now taken over. So you're paying more at every level. And I think that what they've done in taking away the Affordable Care Act tax credits, in slashing Medicaid benefits for people, is they've destroyed whatever did exist of the pieces of a healthcare system that we had in place. So there's not really an argument anymore that we have a working healthcare system. Nobody thinks that. Literally nobody thinks that. So then the question is, okay, well, what do we do? Do we just restore the Affordable Care Act? Well, we might have to restore the tax credits until we can get the majority we need in the House, the Senate, and the White House to sign a Medicare for All bill into the House. But we have been organizing towards that. And what we're finding now, I established a Medicare for All PAC about 4 or 5 years ago. That is now raising millions of dollars from small dollar donors, all small dollar donors, thousands of them, millions of them across the country. And we are electing champions who are ready to stand up and fight for Medicare for All and not take money from those for-profit insurance companies that are bankrolling most of the campaigns of people that are fighting against Medicare for All. But we're also building the coalition we need in Congress. And so my Medicare for All bill now in the House has, I think it's 114, 115 co-sponsors. The last several that came on are not Progressive Caucus members. It's people like Shamari Figures in Alabama, who's like, Pramila, healthcare has collapsed in Alabama. I don't even have a rural health clinic that my people can go to. It's people like Jared Moskowitz in Florida, who's like, yes, we need Medicare for All. These are not Progressive Caucus members. And I think we have begun to build the coalition we need. And I've gotten commitments when we take back the House to have hearings on Medicare for All, to move the bill forward. I was able to do that many years ago, the first hearings ever we had. And they were such thoughtful discussions about what a healthcare system really should be. And the fact that Medicare for all the things that are set against it, is really just an insurance card that the government provides so that you have healthcare from start to finish, and the set of benefits that are covered that are expanded beyond what Medicare provides today. So I think we just did a national polling. We oversampled in very conservative battleground districts, swing districts, just because we're always told that what works in Seattle doesn't work in, wherever across the country. So we wanted to show that that wasn't true. And you know what we found? 90% of Democrats, 60% of independents, and 1 in 5 Republicans supports Medicare for All, even after you lob all the private insurance company attacks on them. And that's because, unfortunately, the healthcare system has collapsed. So that's why I say, out of the ashes of ruin, maybe we can build something that truly is a universal healthcare system.
Yeah, from your mouth to the goddess's ears, Congresswoman. I do want to pivot to a story that has obviously been fairly all-consuming for the last couple of years, as you have been at the forefront for calls for greater public accountability from the DOJ regarding the Epstein files. With there just being so much information out there, some of it true, some of it not, what do you want voters to focus on when it comes to this story? And in your opinion, what does real accountability actually look like in this case?
Well, I want voters to focus on the absolute corruption of this administration in trying to cover up the ring of predators and pedophiles that has preyed on young women across this country and girls. And yes, I got very involved with this issue. I've been, I think, Marcus, I've been on the front lines of fighting around sexual assault and domestic violence for years as an advocate. And when I heard about the Epstein files, and Pam Bondi was before us in the Committee of Jurisdiction, Judiciary, where I sit, I was the first Democrat to question her, and I had coordinated, this is what I call inside-outside organizing, I had coordinated for the Epstein survivors to be in the room and had worked with them on whether they would want to feel it necessary to stand up, ask them to stand up, and ask her to turn around and apologize to them for not redacting their names and for leaving the names of predators and pedophiles redacted in the released Epstein files, which they were only forced to do by an actually bipartisan group of members of Congress. And when she wouldn't turn around and apologize to them. And they were standing there. That was the beginning and the end of the hearing, in my opinion. And of course, a few weeks later, she was gone. I think what people took from that and what people want from that is we are not giving up on this fight. We want all of those people held accountable. I mean, princes, kings, business people that were involved in this need to be brought subpoenaed to come and testify. That needs to be public, and then they need to be held accountable. They need to be put in jail if they were genuinely part of this ring. And there's many of those people that we've identified in the files that should have cases that are opened and moving forward. And then we also need to hold accountable Todd Blanche, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, all the people who have lied to us. And now the reports have come out from the Washington Post about how they were so terrified about people's power that they had to meet in the Situation Room and think about how they were going to beat back the demand for accountability and transparency. This matters because of corruption, because of abuse against young girls and women, and because there has been a giant cover up. And so I think, accountability means real accountability for the survivors who were hurt, but it also means making sure that this never happens again. And how do we strengthen our laws? So we're working on some bills. I'm getting ready to introduce one shortly around a private right of action for survivors. There's a number of things that we're also looking at legislatively on top of that.
Well, we really appreciate you being such an outspoken voice on this. It's hard not to feel like a conspiracy theorist when you see the news coming out with it. But it's been really wonderful to have you kind of leading the public conversation on that. I hate to pivot, but there's a lot of other issues we also want to talk to you about. So you are also the ranking member on the United States House Judiciary Subcommittee, which is now called the Subcommittee on Immigration Integrity, Security, and Enforcement. Obviously, ICE continues to be top of mind for many Americans. The Trump administration has been pursuing mass deportations and detentions, terrorizing communities in places like Minneapolis, and now charging protesters, overseeing shockingly inhumane conditions at detention facilities, stripping legal immigrants of their rights. I could keep going. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. I think Americans have been very clear that they not only disapprove of these policies, but want them to stop now, rather than hoping that they can be overturned after the midterms. What do you think that Democratic leaders in Congress can do now, are doing now, to slow, to stop, to lessen these really profound harms that are taking place in our communities?
Well, one really important thing, and I'm proud to have been a leader in this fight, we got the entire Democratic caucus in the House and in the Senate to refuse to give another cent to ICE and CBP. And yes, the Republicans went ahead and did that, which is stunning because they said we had no money for health care and food stamps, but they gave $140 billion last year in the big bad betrayal bill that they passed. And then they just gave another $70 billion when there was still $100 billion remaining. And so, yes, they've poured an inordinate amount of money into this, but it was very important that Democrats said no to that immediately because it helped to focus the conversation and change it. We've never had that kind of support to try and counter all of the money that's been going in for years under Democratic administrations into ICE and CBP. We finally got that. That may be a tiny silver lining of all of this cruelty as people realize this cannot continue. I think that the other piece that's really important is seeing the cruelty unleashed on the streets of Illinois and Oregon and Washington and communities across the country, and then most significantly in Minnesota. And the response of the community, and I'm a community organizer, so this is what I really believe changes the narrative. Response of the community to stand up, to take incredible risks to the point where people were shot and killed on the streets who were not immigrants, who were not people of color. They were white folks who were U.S. citizens, which drew, fortunately, unfortunately, whatever, drew a lot of attention to the issues. And I think that that response and then the rallying cry around the country was so important to getting ICE and CBP out of Minnesota, to making it a top issue on the table. Now, all of that said, we haven't been able to overturn the things that they're doing. I mean, they still funded ICE and CBP despite our holding up. We have been pushing back. I'm holding my own hearings because as a ranking member, not the chair yet, I don't get to hold hearings. They decide the content of the hearing. So I was like, why am I just allowing this to happen? I started holding hearings on my own. And a week after Renee Good was murdered, I took 29 members of Congress out to Minneapolis so that we could lift up those stories. And we have gotten people released because we showcase their stories at these hearings and we turn it into a community organizing project. We've gotten detention centers shut down. We've finally gotten agreement within the caucus that private for-profit detention centers should not exist. This has been a bill that I introduced 8 years ago, and I'm finally getting the consensus for it. So I think that it is so frustrating that it's taken us this long to really point out that ICE and CBP never should have been constructed the way they were constructed. They're a recent creation. It's not like they existed before 2001. They only got constructed when the Department of Homeland Security was created as this giant unaccountable agency. Immigration enforcement is a civil matter. It is not a criminal matter. It should be within the Department of Justice. It should not be treated as a criminal matter. And I think it's time for us to break up the Department of Homeland Security, go back to some of the things we used to have, like FEMA as an independent agency, so that DHS can't just take resources that are supposed to go to hurricanes and, rebuilding communities across the country and put it into immigration enforcement. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do. Most importantly, in the 25 years that I've been working as an immigration activist and advocate on the outside and now on the inside, I have never seen the support for humane immigration reform as I've seen today. And so this is once again a place where I think out of the ashes of cruelty, of the horrible abuses that have happened, this is also an opportunity for us to find strength, to build coalition, and to pass once and for all, for the first time in 35 years, real, true, humane immigration reform that acknowledges all of the incredible benefits and contributions of our immigrant brothers, sisters, and siblings.
Listening to you, Congresswoman, I have to say, to anybody who is battling political cynicism in this moment, like the anecdote is a 5-minute conversation with you, because I tell you, I feel I feel a little bit more hopeful already. That that said, and moving to another topic that is of great import, uh, we're currently watching trans people and especially trans children be turned into political fodder by people who just need a scapegoat and a culture war. And so I want to ask you if there's a trans person or a family or friends of a trans person who is listening right now and feeling like this country is debating their very right to just exist, what would you want to say to them right now?
I would say, I see you. I love you. You are strong. You have a place in this community to be who you are. And we are not going to throw you under the bus. We are going to stand up and fight for your rights like we fight for everybody's rights. We are not going to allow people to scapegoat you. This is Pride Month. Just this morning, I did a speech on the House floor to honor Juniper Blessing, who, as you know, was murdered at the University of Washington. And we really celebrated her life, me and Teresa Leger Fernandez, Congresswoman from New Mexico, where she was actually from. And it was so beautiful because it was an opportunity to say, we see the wholeness of who people are. Yes, they are trans. And that is just a piece of who they are. It is central to identity in many cases, and it is not everything. It is they are so much more than just a word. And so I think that for us to constantly be able to show that we are fighting. And I was so proud to introduce the Trans Bill of Rights because it's a forward path. And Jalen Scott, who I'm thrilled to have endorsed in her run for the state legislature as an advocate, she worked with me and a group of people across the country, leaders, to put together what does a path forward look like to get us to full equality. And now that bill has 107 co-sponsors. When I introduced it a couple of sessions ago, it had like 20. So again, it's like the cruelty, and I say this as an organizer, sometimes strength comes in times of crisis. The cruelty exposes who they are, and it gives us an opportunity to show the full humanness of who we are. And we are a people of love and inclusion and diversity and the right for everybody to be who they are. So I'm going to be at Pride Parade on Sunday. My staff says it's a full body experience when you march with me because we don't go in the car and wave. You know, we are running in the streets, hugging everybody and celebrating our community as a place that is safe for everyone.
Well, we certainly look forward to having the full body experience of Pride.
Anybody is welcome to come march with us. But put your running shoes on. I do not wear, I wear my running shoes.
Yeah. All good community celebrations should require that kind of involvement. It strikes me that there's a through line to all of the topics that we've been talking about with you today, from trans rights to anti-immigrant politics to the normalization of corruption. So much of what we're talking about is really an attempt to narrow who counts as fully human, fully deserving of rights, fully safe. And we're seeing a real divergence of that between states as well, in terms of places where people can exist safely. And so I guess it seems to me that this is demanding a broader project from all of us of sort of developing a new kind of coherent moral language for how we want to serve each other, right? And what kind of government we want. How would you sort of articulate what that kind of moral language of the fight ahead looks like?
Wow, that's a beautiful and very deep question. And I would have to think about it to give it the full answer I think that it deserves. But I guess what I would say, and I'm thinking as you talked about, how communities are so different across states, how lucky we are to be in Washington state. I think about the dilution of the Black vote as something we haven't talked about yet, but with the Voting Rights Act and Calais, and the fact that dilution of the Black vote also means a dilution of everybody's vote. Like this is everybody's issue. It's not like it just matters to Black communities. And I do think that at the end of the day, maybe it's as simple as saying we are all human beings who deserve love, respect, and the ability to thrive. And nobody should be thrown under the bus, not because you're a Republican, not because you live in a southern state, not because you live in a red state or a blue state, not because you are trans or immigrant or Black or brown or anything else. Or poor. I mean, look at in the richest country in the world, we have 125 million people who are poor or low wage. That's crazy. We have $220 billion of medical debt in this country. And so I think of this as being, how do we bring forward our best selves, even to the people who are hateful to us? And how do we at the same time not be pushovers? We have to develop a fighting spirit. We are in a fight for the soul of our country. And we can't just be nicey nice and think back to 3 decades ago, 30 years ago, when there was bipartisanship, and so-called compromise. What does compromise really mean if you want to deport 1,000 if you want to separate 1,000 kids from their parents and I want to separate 0? Compromise is not 500. So we have to be principled about how we move forward, and we have to think about moving forward in ways that advance. Yes, we may not get everything we want, but how do we advance people, as many people as possible, not set our sights too low, as many people as possible, do the hard things, but not allow somebody else to suffer because those people move forward. To me, that's a principled compromise. That's how I think about my yes votes and no votes on the floor every day. But it's really that moral language of humanity, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
No, absolutely. Well, Congresswoman, I do want to ask you because you'll actually be celebrating, I want to say, a decade in Congress come November. And I remember talking to you, I think it was a couple of days after you were first elected in 2016, and you had very mixed feelings because you were obviously happy about entering Congress, but it just so happens that somebody else was entering in the presidency at that time, who many people didn't think was fit nor would actually win in our current president Donald Trump. And so I want to ask you, in this decade that you've been in there, particularly with, we're about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of this country come July 4th. For you, what have those 10 years taught you about this country? What has it taught you about yourself? And then how do you still have hope for this country given all that you have seen in that 10 years? Like, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, let alone you, you know? I mean, I know that you told me once, this is when you were actually running for state senator, of my district that I still live in Washington. You said, "I don't have," I don't wanna paraphrase, you specifically said, "I do not have a give up bone in my body."
you put that on the front page of your
I
newspaper, I
did, I did
remember.
indeed.
Yeah. Well, that's true. I don't have a give up bone in my body. um, but I also have something else. I came to this country when I was 16 by myself, and I had no money in my pockets. My parents, I came by myself. My parents, I've never lived on the same continent as my parents since I came here. And I have been given so much by this country, and it has been a shining star on the hill, right? That's what America is for so many people around the world. And to think that I came here with that, and I now get to represent working people who deserve opportunity that I
Mm,
had that doesn't exist in this country anymore. I guess to me, it's like I can't give up. Look at all the people I've worked with over my career, immigrants, undocumented immigrants and refugees and asylees who traveled miles across continents in bare feet. I think about all the things that they have done to preserve a future that matters. I think about working people who built this country. I think about, all the people who were brought over on slave ships and actually constructed the place that we live in today, the indigenous people whose lands we took. And all of that history comes to me. And the phrase just keeps coming back to me about we're building a more perfect union. That means it's not perfect. It will not be perfect. And for somebody, believe me, who really wants perfection in my life, that is not always an easy concept. But I think it is at the core of who we are as a country, as a democracy. And I also think about Benjamin Franklin's words when, somebody asked him, do we have a monarchy or a republic? And he said, a republic if we can keep it. That means that it is hard all the time to keep it, but it is the most powerful work we can do. And at the end of the day, Marcus, I really believe that hopelessness and powerlessness are tools of the oppressor.
right, right.
And I sure as hell am not going to let them oppress me by making me hopeless or powerless, because fundamentally, I believe so strongly in the strength of the people organizing together for a better future.
Amen.
Thank you both
Yes.
for just such thoughtful questions and the chance to be on with you, and for just continuing to put the conversation out there on all these important topics. Really.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for all of your work, and looking forward to seeing you this weekend. Yeah, Nora, I have to say, like, there are times where even, doing this show every week that and I know this comes as a surprise to you, get very jaded about politics. But I will say in the conversation that we had with Congresswoman Jayapal, it was truly at least for me, cause and reason to hope in the sense
Yeah.
that yes, there are actually people there who are doing the hard work of trying to govern, or at the very least, doing the hard work of trying to ensure that, they can halt some of the worst impulses of of our this current presidential administration. And I am truly just glad that somebody like her is there and doing the work.
Yeah, she truly is like a ray of light. I it was so incredible to talk with her today. Um, we talk a lot about like the way that this podcast lets us meet our heroes, and people always say don't meet your heroes, but I think really what they mean is don't meet your heroes and then have to ask them the kinds of hard questions that Marcus and I
Yes.
scripted for her, which she obviously knocked out of the park anyway.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, as joyous as our conversation was with, the Congresswoman, shall we share our official joys of the week,
Yes.
Nora?
I have more joy. Do you have more joy?
I do have some more
Okay.
joy this week,
Wow.
so, yeah,
What a
surprisingly
week.
enough. Uh, shall I start first? You wanna
Sure,
start
go
first? How
for
do you
it.
wanna Yeah, so yeah, this is kind of a small thing, but I will say, and like I want to preface this by saying I think FIFA is maybe the most corrupt organization other than I don't know the Italian mafia or something in the world. Uh, but last week I had the opportunity last Friday to attend a World Cup match. It was the United States men's national team versus the Australian team, and, before that, I got to go to this, pop-up activation that they had on the waterfront here in Seattle, and it was just so amazing to see it this the city of Seattle in such a way where I think this isn't just true of Seattle, but I think it's true of, wherever you live. There's so often I think we take, eh, this city for our cities for granted in the sense that we focus a lot on the negativity, and just to be there at, like, 9 in the morning, you see so many people from all across the world. There's this just spectacular, sunny day. You're right on the water. You have, former Seahawk Marshawn Lynch is like leading the parade down from the waterfront to to the stadium where the game was played. And you just realize, man, I just live in such a beautiful
Totally.
place, right?
Yeah.
With, you know, and everybody for the most part was just very gracious. I mean, I'm not gonna ruin this joy by by saying that there are a couple of people from the administration who were there who I just do not speak,
The
to not have a
gall of
high
them to
opinion
show up
of.
in Seattle
I know.
in
Oh my
Pride
god.
Month, Marcus,
Yes.
on Juneteenth. Like, what
And
are they doing?
and unvaccinated too, at least one of them. I'll just leave it
Ew.
there. But that said, I'm not gonna ruin my joy by talking about them. So I will just say, like, it was great to sort of see the beautiful city of Seattle through the eyes of a tourist, if you
Yeah,
will. And it was funny talking to somebody who was like, "Wow, so this is like a socialist city? Like, maybe city under socialism isn't too bad." And it was like, "Huh, maybe it isn't, man. I don't know." But anyway, no, it was a good day. It was a
that's
really good day.
awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, like, definitely one for the history books. And hilariously, my joy is very similar to yours, although I did not get to go to the extremely cool parties, that you went to. But it's so I think local listeners may know that hit, we broke 2 records for public transit ridership in the last
Yes.
week, largely because of the World Cup being here, and because we have an awesome light rail system that took freaking forever to finalize. But I've heard all these people kind of like walking around the city for the last couple of weeks, enjoying not just the public transit, but like the beautiful waterfront that we created by like destroying an old like highway and actually taking it
Yeah.
down and building like beautiful public space and being like, oh, is this like what infrastructure and like tax dollars does?
Yeah,
And
people
it's
are
like,
making that
yeah,
connection. I got it,
I
yeah.
know, and, like but not just like, "Oh, this is a good thing and I recognize," but, like, making that connection with actual joy in how they're experiencing it,
Yeah.
and as someone who gets, like, truly, like, genuine joy from, like, riding light rail because it's just, like, so nice how it works,
Yeah.
and, I just it's really lovely to see a broader set of people not just from our city, but from all around the country, from other countries, experiencing the joy of like actual functioning city infrastructure and realizing that it's something that's worth investing in and worth building for ourselves. And like we can actually have nice things and enjoy
Yeah,
them.
we
So
can indeed. We can indeed. Well, that is a wonderful note for us to sign off on, Nora. So shall we get out of here for the day?
yeah, we'd better. Well, folks, the republic is still standing, technically. The way a house plant or my house plants are still kind of alive when I water them with coffee and good intentions, like once every 2 weeks. Not thriving exactly, but refusing to fully commit to dying or refusing to give up. We'll take it.
Yes, yes, we will. And if you'd like to support the show and help us continue converting civic dread into audio content you can listen to while staring blankly at your grocery bill, head to inthemeanwhilepodcast.com. We genuinely could not do this without you, and we mean that in both the emotional and financial sense, folks.
Huge, huge thanks to Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal for joining us and briefly making optimism feel like a reasonable lifestyle choice rather than a diagnosable condition. She has a gift for absorbing the full weight of what is happening in this country and responding not with despair, but with a bill, a coalition, and apparently inexhaustible energy to fight for both.
I admire that, let me tell you. And a massive thank you to producer Jessica Partnow, who receives our loosely organized panic each week and returns it to us as something resembling a coherent podcast. She's doing the Lord's work with substandard raw material, and we are very, very grateful.
Also, deep appreciation to Ahamaluo for the music, which is so good. It creates a brief window of optimism before the content reminds you of what show you're actually listening to.
Yes, and you can catch In the Meanwhile Wednesdays at 5 p.m. on KVRU or wherever you stream podcasts while simultaneously composing a strongly worded email you will never send.
New episodes drop every Friday. In the meantime, check on someone close to you. Try to remember that the news cycle, however relentless, is not actually your circulatory system.
You're allowed to put the phone down, folks. The collapse will still be there when you pick it back up. I promise you. I do promise
And
you.
look, if you're feeling overwhelmed, just know that so is everyone else who's paying attention. The difference between despair and resilience is mostly just stubbornness, like my plants, and clearly you have some.
We find that genuinely admirable, I must say.
So take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you in the meanwhile.